أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنك ميت وإنهم ميتون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام. وبعد. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. The etiquette I mentioned yesterday that we would touch upon at the beginning of our talk today is the etiquette of visiting Imam Husayn alayhi salam for the first time when you go to visit him. It's a recommendation, it's not incumbent. However, unlike all of the other ma'sumin, where there is a strong recommendation that as soon as you arrive at the land of the shrine, then you do ghusl, you change your clothes, you perfume yourselves, and then you go to visit them. You visit them in this most pristine and beautiful external state, as well as the best internal state that you and I can have. However, specifically for the ziyarah of Imam al-Husayn, the sixth holy Imam mentions that, as I understand it, it's the first visitation and not those that go on after that. But let's say you're walking from Najaf to Karbala. Let's say you moved from another country and came towards Iraq. And now that finally you have visited and you lay eyes on this dome of a man who you have wept over, lamented over, but most importantly learnt from since you were a child. Year on year, you've learnt what sacrifices from this man. You've learnt what it means to be a principled individual, even in the face of temptations from his companions. Now when you go to visit him specifically, the Imam says, visit Husayn in a disheveled state whilst you're covered in dust. Disheveled, as I mentioned, does not mean in a state where you don't have any regard for the tahara of your clothes, not that. But whilst your clothes are still pure, but you don't look in the most presentable state of visiting an individual. Normally you would wash up, you would clean yourself, you'd perfume yourself, you wouldn't have clothes that are dusty, wouldn't have a certain stench of sweat showing the lengthy journey and the bus rides that you've been sitting in. But the sixth Imam says it's different when it comes to Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam. Why? Imam says go to him in a disheveled state whilst covered in dust, because Husayn died in a disheveled state covered in dust. Whereas every other individual, immaculate Imam that you go and visit, every prophet that you visit was given the ghusl, was shrouded, was perfumed with camphor before he was buried. Husayn ibn Ali is different. If he was buried in this disheveled state, in a state where he was covered with dust, then why should you go to visit him at least the first time in a fashion where you are now clothed in beautiful, clean clothes that smell of fragrance? Go to him showing the exertion of effort that you had in coming to his grave. You've noticed that Allah has placed the graves of the majority of our Imams, at least, in places where it's difficult to go to. They're probably third world countries. They have extreme heat when you go in certain months. Allah wants to see you and I exert effort. This isn't meant to be a holiday that you and I take. It's meant to be exertion of effort. There's meant to be difficulty attached to it so that you and I teach ourselves and the next generation that yes, there are times in your life where you save money and you'll go for a holiday with your family. That's encouraged. You go and see the world and learn. But there's a time in your life where you will save money, but you'll put yourself through difficulty in a journey because the end result is much greater than your difficulty. Because you'll remind yourself and your children from the onset when they are young that there are certain individuals that God has gifted us with, these guides that He's given us, that for their visitation we'll put ourselves through discomfort and we'll remind ourselves that they put themselves to the nth degree of difficulty in order to protect this religion that has come to you and I on a silver platter. Simply for salah and the establishment of prayer, do you not see how much the Prophet had to go through? He had to go through people throwing rubbish at him. He had to go through men pelting him with stones. He had to return back to his house scarred, bleeding, simply because he was a man who was establishing prayer in public. And that you and I today can pray at any mosque in any corner of the street. We have to remind ourselves and the next generation that this didn't come with ease. Today you and I, when we go for Hajj, it didn't come with ease. You know, in the Harwala, as an example, in the Harwala between Safa and Marwa, you know, remember the green lights that are there, and it's recommended for the men to rush, to strive a bit more, to run if they can between the two green lights. Ever asked yourself why? Why is it that I'm told that it's mustahab, it's recommended to run between these green lights when I go for sa'i? It's because of this difficulty that the Prophet had. When he was finally able to go and send the Muslims for Hajj, the polytheists would look from a distance. When they would leave Mecca, they would go to a place where between the valley that they were in, they could only see that part of the sa'i that you and I see the green lights in today. So the Prophet would tell the Muslims, when you get to that area, run, so that the disbelievers realize that we have energy despite the fact that they've put us through turmoil. Despite the fact that we've come to the house of God, even in the midst of the summer months, it's hot, it's difficult. But we're not going to give up an obligation because of the difficulties that are around us. Run between those green lights so the polytheists know that they can't come and attack us, that we're still strong. After the green light finishes, start walking again. What you and I have as a religion today didn't come easy. Do you not remember when the Prophet and those who believed with him, especially his greatest wife, when they were pushed away, they were ostracized by society, they were exiled, and they had to live in the valley of Abu Talib? Do you not remember the difficulties that they went through? That men, fully grown men, had to share a date. They had to break a date in half and share it with one another. That's what they would dine with. Don't you remember the difficulties that they had when it came to marriage? That the disbelievers would say that ensure that you do not marry anybody from Muhammad's followers. If a man from Muhammad's followers comes and extends his hand in marriage to your daughter, ensure you reject it. If you from your sons wants to marry someone from Muhammad's clan, ensure that you do not accept and give permission. You ostracize your son. When they come back into Mecca, when they come back and they want to buy from the souq, then remember that you have to double the price. Make it difficult for Muhammad's people to buy, even though they might have the wealth. Even if they've saved up to buy flour and rice, whatever it may be, wheat, things that are basic necessities for man, ensure that you double the price. And that's why this religion tells us that this is what was done to the Prophet. This is what was done to his holy family. But they lived through difficulty for a greater reward. They never lived through difficulty so that people would praise them. If they wanted praise, then there's a few verses in the Quran that don't sit right with a man who wanted praise. But if this was a man who simply desired to be totally submissive to God, That if Allah, you tell me to go to battle, I go. If you tell me to stay back, I stay. If you tell me to make peace, I make peace. And O Prophet, even at times when Allah tells him, go hungry, he remains hungry. That was a man who you and I have been born into his creed as his followers. Surely when we go to their visitation, we too should remember the difficulties that they went through, so that we don't take this religion that we have lightly. In yesterday's discourse, I asked you to do something at the end, that if you wanted to awaken an exercise that I feel has immense benefit, I asked you to go home and to write a will similar to that of Imam Ali. 3 paragraphs of what I tasked you with. Not a will of the Sharia. That's something that you should have done, or that I should have done, and if we haven't, then that has to be done. But a will where I give advice to my children. A will that after they've buried me, they come home and they open this letter, they see in my handwriting that I tell them, Muhammad, Ali and Fatima, now that you've buried me, this is what I want to leave you with. Those 3 paragraphs, I told you that I won't be able to tell you what you wrote, but I can tell you what you didn't write. No sane individual will leave a final writing and a final piece of advice to his children, but that he will now decipher what is real and what will allow for his child to have a good destiny, compared to that which is superficial, that a child will learn by themselves. I guarantee that no man and no woman dictated to their child what degree to do in university. I guarantee that no father who wrote that last night was concerned about how much wealth his child would accumulate, was not concerned about the family in which his son would get married into or not marry into, was not concerned about the reputation in society and even the world of his son. What he would have been concerned with is telling his son, oh my son, have faith and believe in God. Oh my son, don't miss a prayer, because you'll miss one and it'll allow you ease to miss the second, and before you know it, you would have become like me, an old father who's looking and staring at death in its eyes, knowing that he has years to repay, but laziness gets the better of him. Oh my son, don't delay the Hajj, it's an obligation. My son, don't lie. Because I remember hearing a hadith from Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, in which he says, and he reminds us that, oh man, do you know that there's a master key to every sin? If you want someone to fall into every sin, every possible sin and vulgar act that you and I can think of, the Ahlul Bayt tell us that the master key is drinking alcohol. No sooner does one consume alcohol, then you'll realize that everything is an open play check for him. It's open now. The playbook is open, he'll indulge. But then the Imams go a step forward, and strangely they have that final statement, if you remember. He says, وَالْكِذْبُ أَشَرُّ مِنَ الشَّرَابِ, but lying is worse than alcohol. He's telling us that what seems to be heavier on your scales may not necessarily be the heaviest in the scales of God. That when a man begins to lie, he opens up absolutely everything. Even the ability to drink alcohol requires him to lie to his family. And you think a man who lies at work will not lie to his own children? You think a man who lies at work will not lie to his spouse, his wife? Obviously he will. He can't all of a sudden take off the garb of vulgar actions and vice when he enters his house. He'll nurture his children like this. You think his children won't hear him on the phone speaking to somebody else, lying through the skin of his teeth? They'll see him. They'll hear him. That's why the Imams tell us that this religion that God has given you and I is not a complicated religion. Have you noticed, if you just go through the wajibat, it's a very simple religion to act upon. Don't lie is not difficult. Don't backbite is not difficult. In actual fact, it'll just give you more time in life to do what you want to do. In that will that you wrote last night, I guarantee that the final result was one of two. Either you wrote a reflection of your own life to your son and your daughter. When you said to your son or daughter last night that remember to look after your siblings, it's because you look after your siblings. when you wrote, look after your mother and be there and serve her as much as you possibly can, it's because you were able to look after your parents to the end of their life. That's one possibility. But the other possibility is that you wrote what you wish you would have become, but you didn't. That when you wrote pray on time, I wrote with the hand of one who knows that he doesn't pray on time. But I want it for my son. I want the best for my daughter. So I wrote it, but I stand as a hypocrite today telling them what to do when I'm not able to do it myself. Not able, not willing to do it. God would not have made it incumbent upon each and every one of us to do a wajib act, but that everybody has the ability to do it. When He tells us don't backbite, it's a simple act. This religion is not complicated. You don't have to go all the way to the end of the world to gain knowledge on this religion. It's at your fingertips. But it requires a true man or a true woman to uphold principles when it's easy to indulge in vice. In Surah Yusuf, it is mentioned, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. This soul that I have, this base desire that I have, it's calling me towards evil. I want to be a lazy individual. I want to sit back and do nothing in life. I want wealth to be thrown at my footsteps. And I just want to enjoy from this dunya. But the Imams have told us that's not going to happen. Leave aside that desire and that dream that you have, that you'll have that income coming in and you won't have to work and you can indulge in desire. Imams tell us that paradise is surrounded by tests and tribulations. You can't enter it. It's impossible. If the best of the best, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he had to go through the greatest of tests, that Allah tells him, فَاصْبِرْ كَمَا صَبَرَ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. O Prophet, the patience that you will need to have in order to get through this life of yours of 63 odd years or so, the patience that you will need, O Prophet, is the patience of all the Ulul Azm prophets coming together combined. Remember the patience that Musa needed. You'll need that, O Muhammad, and more in order to get through the difficulties and the tests that are going to be placed in front of your life. He was in a society where fully grown men like you and me were burying their daughters alive. I mean, what heart does a man have to have in order to fall prey to the pressures and the peer pressure that he's under in society in order to bury his daughter alive? We'll laugh at it today. We'll say that how is it possible that a father today, after seeing the pangs of labor that his wife had to go through and the difficulties of bearing this child for 9 months, how is it possible that he holds him or her, he holds this young daughter in his hands and then buries her alive? Whilst this daughter is crying, he's throwing sand upon her face. How is it possible? At that time, it was giving up your children and burying them alive. But that's a lesson from history, that today it's very easy for the same father to go astray and fall prey to society and want to make his son and want to make his daughter a slave to the society outside. That, oh my son, I want you to have this job that wakes you up at 7, makes you sleep at 11, where you don't see your family for 65 years, and then when you retire, then you live life. Let's fall prey to a system that society has begun to dictate. Let's become slaves of the educational system that tells you to study and get this degree and that degree. Knowledge is beneficial, but falling into a blind servitude of a system is not going to be beneficial. That only after you've done this level of knowledge, then you go into a job, then you work blindly for 40 years, give your soul to somebody else and another company, and then after 65 years, then you get your pension and then you live a life. What's left after 65? If you have a child when you're 20, 25, there's a 25-year age gap minimum between you and your first child. 20, 25 minimum. Then you have multiple children. By the time that child is able to live life, when he needs assistance, if you're going to be 65, what relationship is there? What common denominator is there between that father and a child of 20? He's living in a different world. You cannot understand the peer pressure that he's living through. You won't be able to be his backbone. But if you and I have been blind, not been willing to advise our children, not be willing to stand by them and tell them, you know what, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I made. There are certain mistakes you'll have to make in life in order to learn. But there's other mistakes that you don't have to make. I mentioned yesterday how Luqman gives this piece of advice to his son. First piece of advice, that, oh son, be careful, that every act that you do, God will bring it forth. Whether it's the size of a mustard seed, hidden within a rock, in the heavens or the earth, God will bring it forth. Second, he says, establish prayer. Don't just pray, establish it. In your house, in your mosque, at your workplace, establish the prayer. Luqman continues, he says, وَلَا تُسَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ. Don't turn your face in contempt to people. Don't show pride in front of people. Just because somebody is of a different status to you, somebody said something untoward towards you, somebody insulted you, don't simply turn your face to them. Then he has a very strange piece of advice to his son. وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. My son, even when you walk, don't stamp your feet. Walk because you should realize that you're a gift and this earth is a gift to you. Don't walk like the rich walk. When I say the rich, I don't mean the rich like Khadija alayhi salam. I don't mean the rich like the second holy Imam. They had wealth. I don't mean rich like the eighth holy Imam. They had wealth as well. But notice how they were never controlled by their wealth, but they controlled their wealth. I have to mention this hadith only because I love it. I mentioned it to you many times before. You remember at the time of the second holy Imam, a man from Sham comes to him and he says to him, Al-Hasan, I'm in need. It seems that he doesn't even accept his imamah. He just says, Al-Hasan, I'm in need. And Imam tells his helper who's with him, go to the safe, open it and take everything out and give it to him. Thousands of dinars, dirham come out and he gives it to this man. And the man turns astonished to Imam. And he says, oh Hassan, don't you want to know why I've asked for money? You don't want to know, you don't take me through a series of questions before you give me? And Imam mentions this most beautiful principle. If you can live by it, you will not be attached to wealth. And you don't have to do what the Imam did. You don't have to give up everything. But at least give up something when somebody extends their hand to you. Imam says that Allah has made it a habit with me that when I ask Him, He gives me without questioning. So I have made it a habit with people that I give them without questioning. Then he says, I am afraid that if I begin to question before giving, then He will begin to question before giving. When I turn to God and I plead for forgiveness, I don't expect Him to ask me questions. I expect His generosity to be such that before I even ask, He's forgiven me. Because the Quran states very clearly, He knows what's within man's heart. He's closer to me than my jugular vein. It doesn't even require words to come out of my mouth, because the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt say, an-nadam, even remorse is a method of tawbah. Even remorse is a form of tawbah. You just have to feel regret inside your heart for something. Luqman tells his son, don't be proud. Don't you understand that that's the mother of all evils? And I'm telling you, even the way you walk indicates what you think about yourself. If you're a man who can lower his gaze, if you're a man who's not attracted by everything that glitters around you, who doesn't need to acquire everything that's in his reach, then you're a man who is humble. His gait is humble as well. The way his neck holds his head, you can tell whether or not he's an individual who is humble. He's not telling him, cast judgment on other people. He's saying, look at yourself first. I tell my children, even the way you take your slippers out of the rack is an indication of whether or not you care. To take slippers out of a rack and to just throw it on the earth and then wear it, isn't it clear that everything will speak on the Day of Judgment? Do you remember what limbs Allah mentions in the Quran that will speak? He says your hands will speak. He says your feet will speak. Do you remember in the Quran Allah says even your skin? Even your skin will speak on the Day of Judgment. Go and research. Even your skin. And Allah mentioned the conversation between skin and man. If you throw even your shoes on the ground, simple etiquette that you and I need to teach ourselves and our children. What does it say of a man? Do you think the Imam would do it? You think the Prophet would do this? One of the easiest ways to know if something is of high moral or not is to ask yourself that if the Prophet was standing next to me, if the 12th Imam reappears now, inshallah, if he reappears and he's standing, would I do this? If somebody insults me, would I simply turn my face? If a poor person came, would I turn my face? Somebody of a lesser degree in society? He tells his son, don't turn your face in people in contempt. Don't walk on earth like a man who is proud. Inna Allah la yuhibbu kulla mukhtalin fakhur. Allah doesn't like every self-deluded and boastful individual. We continue with where we left off yesterday in the will of Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Imam says to his son, he introduces and concludes who he is. As-sakin masakin al-mawta al-dha'in anha ghadan. I'm a man who is living amongst the dead, and I'm a man who is due to depart very soon. If you look around me, O Al-Hasan, you'll see majority of people around me are dead. Majority are like zombies. They fall and prey to a system. When will they wake up? When will they realize there's more to life than what they're doing? There's more to life than making a name for yourself. These same people that you rush to make a name for yourself with, the same people that you serve, when you die, they won't want to know you tomorrow. The same wealth, O Hassan, that people run towards and hoard, don't they know that it'll be dispersed amongst their family members? Other family members will quarrel with family members in order to inherit from me today. That day that I haven't even been buried, but my brother is fighting over with my son, and my aunt is fighting with my wife, because everyone wants a piece of what I left behind. Notice what the system does and wake up before it's too late. It tells you that you have to work in a fashion where you don't see your children, where you don't see your wife, that you don't even have time to have any commonality between the family, that you sit at the dinner table and nobody knows what to speak about. You only speak about work and education, but what about what's real? Is that why God created me? If I tell myself, you know what, I'll go into retirement at 65, and then I retire at 65, what's the common denominator between every man who desires to retire now at 65? They don't know what to do in life. They sit back on this rocking chair looking out of the window at the flowers in their garden thinking, what next? They say that now my health is deteriorating because I'm not moving anymore. My intellect has become numb and paralyzed because I'm not thinking anymore. Do you know the Imams have a dua, where the fourth Imam has a dua, where he turns to Allah and says, Oh Allah, make it such that I don't have to go out in order to bring a livelihood for myself. Make it easy. Make it easy for me so I don't have to slog, so that my bread will come to me. Not that I'll be lazy. I'll use my own two hands. I'll seek. But make me an individual where wealth comes to me easily, so that now I can spend my time in doing what you actually created me for. I ask you a question, I want you to think about it. If tomorrow you had all the wealth that was necessary for generations to come, what would wake you up tomorrow? What will tomorrow look like? Tonight you have everything. Tell me, what does tomorrow look like? You wake up and you do what exactly? And if you and I are confused and bewildered and we don't have an answer, then it's probably because we fell prey to a system that told us all you have to do is work in life for somebody else's benefit. You paid your mortgage and somebody else's. You paid off your car and somebody else's. Great. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's fine. It's good. But what next? Let's say you are free, an independent man who had his income sources settled. Now what? Now what has God created you for? Now what are you able to do? It's a question every man and woman has to ask themselves to figure out whether or not they're on the right trajectory. Because Imam keeps saying in this will that I'm starting off Al-Hasan by reminding you that you will die, and before you close your eyes, don't let it be that you'll sit on your deathbed. Don't let it be that you'll have your family around you where everyone is looking at the skin complexion changing from brown to white to yellow, and as you're passing away, your final words are, I regret how I lived my life. Don't let your son hear those words from you. Don't let your daughter hear those words, that my father, my mother, they regret how they lived their life. Let it be you telling your child, this is what was most beneficial to me. That you know what, upholding a community, driving an hour so that you could learn about the religion, that's what I'm proud about today. When I'm about to close my eyes, I'm proud that yes, the traffic was as it was, but I drove you for an hour when you were young so that you could be reminded of your religion, be taught in. I'm proud that today you can read the Quran because I spent my time taking you from malim to malim, from muallim to muallim, to teach you the Quran. I'm proud that that's what I will go back to God with today. That today you can even understand what you say. Even when you read the Quran. My generation, I didn't have the opportunity. I migrated from one country to the other country. I had to work. But your generation, I didn't let you fail. I realized that God gave you to me on a pedestal. That you were able to risk starting businesses because you know you could come back even if your business failed, and I would give you a shelter over your head, food to eat on the dinner table. You could take risks. But what I wanted is that I don't close my eyes as a father, but that you, when you open the book of God, you could understand what God is saying to you. Imam alayhi salam mentions that now that I've introduced myself, oh Hassan, let me tell you who I'm speaking to. As a reminder, this isn't specific to Imam al-Hassan, it's to everybody who ends up reading the will of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam begins, he says, إِلَى الْمَوْلُودِ الْمُؤَمِّلِ مَا لَا يُدْرَكَ. He says, I introduce myself to you as a father who is now moving towards death. I'm about to die. I can see it before my eyes. It's staring above me. Every day is just a bonus. But as for you, you are this young child who has just been born, who has aspirations for things you will never achieve. Let me remind you, whatever aspirations you have in your life, remember, oh young child, you will never achieve all of them. You will always fall short, because that's what this dunya is. This dunya is a shadow that you will run after and you'll never be able to catch up with. If you analyze ahadith and Quran, then having aspiration is of two types. One is recommended and one is pushed away. As for the one that's recommended, it's the aspiration to desire the mercy of God. The Holy Prophet says that expectation is a mercy for my community. You never think about this. You never think about certain gifts that God gives you until somebody like the Holy Prophet at his rank or the Ahlul Bayt mention it. I guarantee that if nobody here had opened Dua al-Arafah, they would never have thanked God for the lines on their forehead. Never. They would never have thanked God for their incisor and molar teeth. Because that didn't come to you and I. We fall and prey to a system that only tells us to be grateful for those things that are great and we value, not the things that are working that don't require our attention. But here's the Prophet saying that even expectation is a gift from God. Things like forgetfulness. When was the last time you turned to God and say, God, thank you for giving me the ability to forget? Normally, if you talk about forgetfulness, you think this is negative. I shouldn't forget. There are things that you shouldn't forget, but the actual act of forgetting is a blessing. Imagine a father who loses their child. If they're not able to forget that pain, they won't be able to live. It's a blessing when fallen in the right place. In the same way, the Prophet saying expectation is a mercy for my community, my ummah. Without expectation, no mother would nurse her child and no man would plant a tree. When you plant a seed, it's so small, but there's expectation. that if the sun hits it and the water is given and the soil has its nutrients, this in 1,000 years will become a tree. Maybe I won't sit under the shade of that tree, but somebody else will. It's expectation. That's the positive expectation. You expect God's mercy. But then there's another expectation. And the Prophet says, a man who expects to be alive tomorrow is a man who expects to live forever. When you expect that life is in your own hands, when you can dictate to yourself, I'm going to send the invoice tomorrow, that's great, no problem, you can delay that. But if you tell yourself that I have 2 years of prayers left, I'll start tomorrow, I'll sleep tonight, that's a man who is guaranteeing his life forever. If you and I are a man who is saying, I'm not going to speak to my wife tonight, I'll make up tomorrow. She spoke to me in a fashion I didn't like. My husband spoke to me in a fashion that I didn't like. If a woman says that about her husband, says we'll sleep with our backs to each other tonight, tomorrow, that's a man or a woman who have guaranteed tomorrow. That's the failure of society that has told us that we are so individualistic, that people have to reach out to us, that we can't reach out to people. The Imam says, oh you young man, you are treading the path of people who have died. You know when you go to the maqbara, what's that dua that you say that's always on the plaque as you enter? You say, Salam min ahli la ilaha illallah. From people who say la ilaha illallah to people who also say la ilaha. Kayfa wajadtum qawl. How have you found this statement, the heaviest of statements that Imam al-Rida says, the heaviest of statements, that Allah says there is no God but Allah. Have you witnessed it? Have you seen everything that God said? Has it come true? In the Quran, the people of Jannah asked the people of Jahannam, هَلْ وَجَدْتُمْ مَا وَعَدَ رَبُّكُمْ حَقًّا. Everything that was promised to you, has it come true? Is it true that God takes you to task for every small action that you did? The disbelievers who we're talking about, not the believers. The believers are forgiven, they're given an easy pass. The disbelievers, was it true that every intention that you made, that you realized, you were taken to action for it? Every glance that you made with your eyes, did God really ask you for everything? They'll say, we found everything to be true. Imam is telling his son, you're walking towards death, open your eyes. Don't be a man who has expectations of the world. Don't be a man who has filled his calendar for the next month and forgotten to place a time for prayer on every day. That you are so busy that you don't have time to pick up the phone to call your own parents. That your parent has to call you and say, I haven't heard your voice for 6 months, what's happening? I haven't seen my grandchildren for 2 weeks, what's happening? Is that a man or a woman who really knows why God has created him or her? Or is that an individual who has fallen prey to what society has taught him and a system that is being pushed down his throat? Imam says, oh my son, you are a victim to ailments. My son, have you not realized, however healthy you are, my words, not Imam's words, that you go to the gym every day, but have you realized that even the healthiest body is taken by the smallest and simplest of illnesses and diseases? Have you not seen that you're healthy and you sit for 40 minutes and then you get a dead leg when you stand up? Have you not seen that a virus takes over and shuts down the entire world, something that you can't even see? And all of a sudden everybody is locking themselves inside a house. Oh my son, realize your weakness in front of Allah. Antumul fuqara'u ilallah. You are poverty stricken in the face of God. Why do you think God created illness? Why do you think this God who has given me food which is healthy, a lifestyle which is healthy, an environment which is healthy, why is it that He brings about illness? Why is it that I'm inflicted? It's to remind man of how weak he is. It's mentioned and alluded to in our traditions that when Malakul Maut was assigned the task that you will take everybody's life, apparently it is said that he has a conversation with God. Doesn't question God, but says, won't people blame me? Won't people point fingers at me and say, you are the one now? Everyone will blame me and insult me and curse me that I'm the one who's taking everyone's life. And God says, no. There will always be a reason, a smoke screen that will cover you from death, and people will point fingers at that. People will say it's that illness that took him away, that terminal illness. People will say it was that car crash that took him away. It wasn't the car crash. How many people have crashed in cars and still survived? How many people have beaten even what you and I consider to be terminal illnesses? Ma sha Allah la ma sha an-nas. What Allah wants will happen, not what man wants. I want to mention something beautiful in the Quran and then I conclude for today. Yesterday I mentioned to you, even the balagha in the Quran, if you spend some time in learning the language, as Luqman says yesterday, in taku mithqala, even if it's this small mustard seed, the noon is dropped, the ta referring to something which is a plural in the feminine language, but Allah is showing us that even the wording in the Quran, the text has been protected. Look at how these words in the Quran are so pedantically perfect that if you read it, you skim through it, you won't pick something up. You have to deliberate on it. الَّذِي خَلَقَنِي فَهُوَ يَهْدِينِ. The one who created me guides me. وَالَّذِي هُوَ يُطْعِمُنِي وَيَسْقِينِ. The one who feeds me and gives me to drink. It's talking about Allah. He created me, He guides me. He feeds me and He makes me drink. Then the Prophet says, وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينِ. But when I fall ill, He cures me. If you skim past it, it just sounds beautiful. What's strange is that everything has been referred back to God. He created me, He guides me. He feeds me, He makes me drink. When it comes to illness, the Prophet says, وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ. But when I fall ill, then He cures me. You know how beautiful this statement is? That even when the prophets used to speak about God, anything that seems negative, they would never attribute it to God. As for illness, it's negative. I'll attribute it to myself. It's my own two doings. As for feeding, it's positive. And it's not me who brings in the food into my house. It's God who sustains me. When somebody doesn't forget God and has death in front of his eyes, such an individual cannot make a mistake when he's placed with a crossroads in life to make a decision between heaven and hell. The Imams tell us that if you want to live a life where you will die the death of a martyr, even though there is no martyrdom available for you, the Prophet is not here, the Imam is not here physically available at will, the Imam say, then think about death 20 times a day. Think, don't let it move away. The Imams say that use the killer of desires, and their companions saying, what is the killer of desires? And the Imam say, death. Think about it. Whenever you make a decision, think about death, you'll make the right decision. You know what I love about Hur? Is that he is a man like you and me. He doesn't have the blood of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt flowing in his veins. He is a man who lives by what Amirul Mu'mineen has been advising Al-Hasan, that keep death before your eyes. Look at your destiny. Don't be bought over by the world. And everything we've discussed thus far, you see it personified and actualized in this man. I love him because he reminds me of me, a fallible human being who has sinned at times and sins at times and makes mistakes. But God never cuts off from him. Until the final moment of his life, God is giving him the ability to make the right decision, such that every sin that he has committed will be wiped away. When we talk about the intersection of Hur with Imam Al-Husayn, as Imam is heading towards Kufa, Hur seems on the onset like a man who is evil. But if you hear his words, this is a man who still has light in his heart, whose heart is still alive and isn't dead. When the letter sacks are brought in front of the Imam and poured in front of the Imam, at that time when Imam says, you people wrote these letters, Hur says, we didn't write any of them. Hur says, I need to arrest you. What are the words of Imam Al-Husayn? Imam says, oh Hur, may your mother mourn over you. That today, if your mother was here, I desire that she cries over bringing up a son like you. That if she knew that she was going through 9 months of pregnancy in the pangs of labor for a man who would have the words that just came out of your mouth, she would cry over bringing up such a son. Those were hard-hitting words. That was an arrow that pierced the heart of Hur. But what does Hur say? He says, "Oh Husayn, if anybody else had said those words to me, I would have replied back. But what can I say of your mother but good?" That means this heart was still alive. He knew the value of the Ahlul Bayt. He said, "Husayn, don't let me arrest you. Take another path. I don't want to be the person who will be remembered tomorrow as the one who arrested Husayn." He goes with the camp of Imam. As finally Imam pitches his tent, Hur writes back and he says, "This is where Husayn has pitched tent in Karbala." Hur was a man that even on the day of Ashura, the commitment of Umar ibn Sa'd, the commitment and the promises of the dunya didn't allure him more than Jannah. This was a man who was promised that you will be given the governorship of rain. We can give you anything you want. You're the greatest of one of the greatest warriors in Kufa is you, O Hur. You tell us what you want, we'll put it at your feet. Yet you find a strange scene unfolding. I narrate from Luhuf of Ibn Tawus. It is said that Imam al-Husayn cries out on the day of Ashura, "Ama min mughithin yughithuna liwajhi Allah." He says, "Is there anybody who wishes to come and help us for the sake of Allah?" Can you imagine the state this Imam must have been in? That today he can't call upon assistance. In Medina he said, "Oh youth of Bani Hashim, come and stand with me." 18, 19 came. Today he stands in the midst of this desert and he cries out. He says, anyone willing to come and help us?" He says, "Ama min mughithin yughithuna liwajhillah," for the sake of God, not for me, for the sake of God. "Ama min dhabin yadhubbu an harami Rasulillah." Is anyone willing and prepared to defend the sanctity of the Prophet? Don't you know this is his granddaughter? Can you think what these renegades will do to her? Can you not for a moment think that you have a duty to protect the Holy Prophet's grandson, the Holy Prophet's granddaughter? Are they not above you in authority? When Hur heard these words, he began to tremble inside his tent. He goes back to his tent. He begins to tremble. He goes to Umar ibn Sa'd. He asks one question and that suffices. He says, "Atuqatil anta hadha ar-rajul?" He says, "I want to hear it from your mouth. Oh Umar ibn Sa'd, are you going to kill this man? Is that why you've come?" And Umar ibn Sa'd turns and he says, "Ay wallah, my God, we're going to kill him. And the easiest form is by chopping off their heads and cutting off their hands. That's what we aim to do. We aim to sever the head of every man who stands in front of us. Man or child, no difference to us." But there was a heart, even amongst the enemy ranks, that was still alive. Hur goes back to his tent. He begins to tremble. Muhajir ibn Aus comes and he says, "By Allah, your action is very strange to me today." "Hur, you're trembling? A man like you." He says, "Oh Hur, if I was to be asked of the bravest men in Kufa, I would not have ignored your name. Your name would have been in the list of the bravest men in Kufa. But in what condition do I see you today, O Hur?" And that's when Hur tells him. That's when Hur personifies this will of Imam Ali. He looks at death, he looks at the dunya. And you know what he replies? He says, "By Allah, at present I'm finding myself in a position where I'm making a decision between heaven and between hell. And by Allah, even if I were to be cut into pieces and then burnt, I would choose nothing over paradise." He says those words. And with those words, he mounts his horses. Apparently, he frees his slave. He informs his son. He has no concern of the dunya anymore. Nothing allures him anymore. He doesn't spend a thought thinking about how my wife will be a widow, what my son's reputation will be after I die, what about the fact that people will remove the wealth from my... He doesn't think about this. He rushes towards Husayn. And he doesn't just approach him as a man with his head held up high. He goes to Hussein with his hands on his head, on the back of his horse. And he says, "Oh Hussein, allow me to introduce myself to you." He says, "Ju'iltu fidak, may I be sacrificed for you, Hussein." All these men who come into the battlefield, they have a battle cry where they introduce themselves. Listen to the introduction of Hur. He comes to Imam Husayn. He says, "I am the same man who prevented you from returning to Medina. I am the man who made things difficult for you. By Allah, I never imagined that these people would behave with you like they're doing. Oh Hussein, I repent before Allah. Do you think that my repentance will be accepted? Is it possible that a man who bears the sins like I do, the man who shoulders the sins that I shoulder, in the mercy and the kingdom of God, can he forgive a man like me?" Imam Husayn, without stuttering, replies and he says, "By Allah, he will forgive you, but now I have an ask from you. You ask me to accept you, I accept. You ask me if God will forgive you, I'm saying God will forgive you. But I ask you, come down from your horse." Look at the generosity of this man. He doesn't want people to die for his sake. He says, "You come down, they're after my blood, not yours. Come down from your horse. Let me embrace you maybe." I cannot but imagine the embarrassment that must have been in the heart of Hur. That he must have been saying, he doesn't say, he must have been saying to himself that, "Oh Hussein, if you ask me to come down, how do I look at Zainab? This is the same lady who was coming towards me in the desert and I stopped her. How do I look at your daughter Ruqayya? How do I tell her that will you welcome the same man who, because of whose actions today you have no water to drink for 3 days? I am that man. It's embarrassing for me. Save me the embarrassment." Then Hur says, "Allow me to be the first of martyrs." The first meaning from this point onwards, I don't want to come down. If you command me, I'll come down. But allow me to just turn on my horse and go straight back into the battlefield. He turns back with the permission of the Imam, moves into the battlefield. Now he gives a different battle cry, introducing the brave Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi who has come from Kufa. He slaughters enemies that come before him. He fights a courageous fight. Finally, when they ambush him like cowards, and he comes crashing to the ground. Imagine what his end could have been, and look at what his end was. His body is brought to Imam al-Husayn. Imam al-Husayn sees this face that has dust all over it, that is smeared with blood. Imagine your end being this, that the hand of your Imam is wiping away the dust from your eyes. And then Imam speaks to him whilst cradling his head in his lap. He says, "Oh Hur, Anta al-Hur kama sammatka ummuka Hur. Truly you are Hur, you are a free man, like your mother named you. Hurrun fi dunya wa hurrun fil akhirah." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين فسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره.